Colleagues, we are once again grateful for the attention you've given us. I want to pick up from where my brother Gideon just left off and conclude on a few issues. So when government does a budget, the budget is not an end in itself. The budget is an instrument to achieve some economic ends. So the taxes that you heard Abna talk about, even where they try to fudge up the numbers, the borrowing that you've heard Gideon talking about, even at an alarming rate, the previous record that Honorable Dr. Amin outlined, all of that is supposed to translate into some economic results. But the priority of the government is what will determine where these resources will go and therefore what results you will get. As was indicated, compensation alone at the Office of Government Machinery, 2.7 billion. And if you look at that particular appendix, total compensation for about 12 ministries put together is about 9 billion. And Jubilee House alone is taking 2.7 billion, a jump from the 326 that we were talking about. So it's about priorities. It's about where you put your money. For example, if you say you want to stimulate, about 9 billion under the administrative sector, 12 about ministries or agencies, Jubilee House alone 2.7. So it shows your priorities. If, for example, you give 50 million Ghana cedis for research, which will not translate into any economic ends. And then you have something else like, let's say, the Women's Development Bank, which could actually assist women. And it requires, from my numbers, it requires about 1.5 billion to be able to do, about 400 million capitalization before you do your branches across the country, before your OPEX, before the float itself for the women. That one, you won't give it money. So it's about your priorities. Now, I just therefore want to demonstrate to you how the priorities of the government will not answer some of the most important questions people have on their minds. Before the budget, many of you did what we call vox pop. You went on the streets and asked people, what do you want to see as the economic result or the economic end of this revenue and borrowing and expenditure that the government is going to do? You will recall that a number of issues were raised by many Ghanaian youth and small businesses. They were expecting that this new economic policy 2025 will address, among other things, cost of living challenges, that it will address, among other things, unemployment, that it will address investment in infrastructure, that it will address investment in education, and efforts to improve the business climate, investment in healthcare, among others. Unfortunately, these issues have not been addressed by the economic policy. The priorities are elsewhere. For those who are looking forward to efforts to halt further increases in electricity bills, they have been disappointed to note that electricity prices will rather be adjusted every quarter. The minister referred to it as the quarterly adjustment of utility tariffs. Every 3 months, light bills will go up. Now, this quarterly adjustment with no policy intervention from the NDC government will mean, as I mentioned, an increase in electricity tariffs every 3 months. Worse is that the government clandestinely removed the subsidies on gas that is made available to the IPPs. Remember, because government was subsidizing, the pricing was at about $7.8 per MMBTU. If you listen to the minister in the budget, he says gas prices have been increased. Why on earth would the government increase gas prices? He hid the fact. The fact is that government, the NDC government, has withdrawn the subsidy. And that is why the price has gone up now to $8.4 per MMBTU. This gas is what is used by the IPPs to produce power, and then they'll pass on the cost to us. So in effect, two things are happening. It's a double whammy. Not only are electricity prices going to go up every 3 months, it will be going up at a higher rate from now. So there's no hope when it comes to the reset of energy pricing. Fuel price increase, for example, which influenced the choices of many drivers in the last election, also did not see a respite in policy direction. Contrary to the NDC's manifesto promise that they were going to use the special petroleum levy to intervene in the market and cushion consumers, the government went silent on that in the budget. Ladies and gentlemen, without any policy intervention announced in the budget, what it means is that drivers can expect that the rises in fuel prices will continue. Already since January, I'm sure you've observed how fuel prices are performing. And when the government had the opportunity to bring their economic policy, they were quiet on it. So there's no hope when it comes to resetting on the matter of fuel prices. Food inflation. You remember before the election, everybody was talking about food inflation, the size of a ball of kinky, the pricing of food stuff. It's been a major challenge to most Ghanaians. Now, you will recall that the MPP introduced the Planting for Food and Jobs program, which was aimed at boosting productivity. But there were some outstanding issues that needed to be dealt with to ensure that that increased productivity could translate into stable or reduced prices at the markets. In the policies outlined by the government in this 2025 budget, there are no efforts to deal with those outstanding issues. The government's program is only to boost production like the MPP did. The key remaining challenges, such as transportation of food items from farm gates, poor storage of foodstuffs, and a liberalized pricing regime, have not been attended to. And what it means is that the continuous increase in food prices have not been addressed. Food price inflation will therefore remain in the medium term. The 2025 economic policy has not addressed it. There is no hope when it comes to resetting the trend of food price inflation. Transport fares. Unfortunately, you can expect that transport fares will continue to rise. This is because the government has not introduced any measure to intervene with the market forces. You will recall that at the tail end of our administration, we announced the policy and actually started a shift towards electronic vehicles, among other things. The underlying issues of fuel and the increasing cost of imported spare parts have not been addressed in the 2025 economic policy. You recall that some of the levies on imported items, including the special import levy, was going to end by 2025. The government has imposed the special import levy from 2026, 2027, 2028. So spare parts are not coming down in prices. And if spare parts are not coming down in prices and fuel is not coming down in prices, what does it mean for transport fares? You are going to see a continued increase in transport fares. So I'm sorry to inform you that there's no hope when it comes to the reset they promised on the matter of increase in transport fares. On the matter of unemployment among the youth, which is one of the biggest issues. Remember, we did about 2.3 million jobs because through a combination of growing the economy average 7% before 2020, and then during this recovery back up to 5.7% by 2024, we were able to create a lot of space, and like Abena mentioned, in the private sector expansion to create jobs, about 2.3, and they said it wasn't good enough. So the youth were looking forward to either high growth targets to create jobs in the private sector, like she mentioned, or at least government employment programs in the public service so that they could also find jobs there. Unfortunately, neither of these two were expressed in the budget. In fact, if you look at paragraph 478 of the policy document, the government has announced a net freeze on public sector hirings. So for those who were hoping to get jobs in the public sector, sorry to disappoint you. Now go to the private sector. When the economy expanded average 7% before 2020, and during this recovery, 5.7 by 2024, we were able to create 2.3 million jobs. The government, when it submitted its program to the technical experts, they have marked the government program that growth would drop from 5.7 to 4.4. If 7% average and 5.7 when we recovered did 2.3 million jobs, will 4.4 be able to do more than that? So if growth was expected to go higher, then you could have been having hope that young people will find jobs in the expanded economy through the private sector. Despite their rhetoric, the facts are that the hope for jobs has been extinguished in this 2025 budget. There's no resetting here. Actually, the situation will most likely get worse. We are wondering now whether this is the reason for which the government deliberately dismissed or terminated thousands of young people because they knew they were going to freeze new recruitment. Is this the reason for which they deliberately dismissed thousands of young people so that they could create an artificial set of vacancies to placate a few of their supporters who will still be expecting jobs when they come to office? While improving the job creation ecosystem is a problem, it is alarming, however, that they have elected a set of priorities to move the money elsewhere. And that's what we've already outlined to you, moving the money to Jubilee House, moving the money to OGM and other places. Infrastructure, and I end of these few ones. Infrastructure investments are known to be a key if you want to open up, grow the economy, create more jobs. Unfortunately, however, the government has failed in making the necessary budget allocations to give meaning to even their own planned infrastructure program. Their planned infrastructure program is what? The big push. $10 billion. If you prorate it over 4 years, that's about 2.5 billion cedis, or $2.5 billion per annum. You will expect that if the government itself is serious about its own big push, they will at least make available $2.5 billion in their first budget, when they have all the goodwill and the credibility. If you go into the fiscal tables, it's only $800 million, less than $1 billion. In effect, ladies and gentlemen, the big push itself needs a push. Else nothing meaningful will happen in their infrastructure program. And finally, even more worrying is the Agenda 101 project, which many districts are looking forward to. It appears to be heading for a halt. Budget allocations for its continuation appear elusive. The dedicated source of funding, and you remember they misbriefed the president that there was no dedicated source of funding, that you needed $1.7 billion more to finish, and that only one had been completed. Even the brief they gave the president was not correct. 3 had been completed and commissioned. Already 400 million had been paid, so it wasn't 1.7 billion. And the claim that there was no dedicated source of funding wasn't true. The dedicated source of funding was Give Health, which was receiving funds from the CAPEX allocation of the annual budget funding amount. Now they've constrained it, as the government is signaling that they will cut funding to GIF. Furthermore, no clear alternative financing has been identified in the budget to fund the project. And this is truly worrying, ladies and gentlemen. Not only is this contrary to the NDC's promises to health workers, you will recall that they will continue the project. You recall President Mahama, then candidate Mahama, promising the nurses that don't worry, we'll continue the projects and finish them and employ you in them. Now, you are realizing that this is becoming an illusion. Not only is it worrying, not only is it contrary, but abandoning these projects or giving them out as franchises, like the president mentioned when he came to Parliament for SONA, will jeopardize the efforts at universal health coverage. The millions of citizens in remote districts who are looking forward to their lives being saved from this healthcare intervention are now at risk. Mr. President, we beg you in the name of God, please do not abandon the Agenda 111 project for political reasons. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the 2025 budget does not offer any real reset. It does not offer any hope. Unfortunately, it will worsen the cost of living, it will worsen the unemployment situation, and it will worsen the rate of infrastructure development in our country. We thank you for your attention this afternoon, and we'll take a few questions.